Guys, take a look at this. This is a beautiful, beautiful meatloaf. I guarantee you'll never taste a meatloaf that's quite as delicious as this. Give it a try. You're really going to be surprised at what you get, guys. This is really, really good. Howdy folks, welcome back to Texas Cooking Today. On this episode, we're going to be making a fabulous dish. This is a humble dish, it's a delicious dish. It's meatloaf. Now when I was a boy, when I was in my teenage years actually, one of my relatives, a distant cousin, married into an Italian family. Now this family had a chain of restaurants in New York, and I was privileged to learn how to make a fabulous rockin' marinara. Really good stuff. You know, the kind of stuff you simmer all day long. I was blessed with learning how to make a really, really good meatball and being taught how to cook it properly. And once I tasted these things, I thought, you know, the ingredients between spaghetti and meatballs and meatloaf, there's not much of a departure there. Okay, when you get right down to it, you take away the pasta and bam, there's a lot of similarities there, folks, a lot. And I thought, okay, I've got to be able to fix meatloaf so I like it, because when I was younger, I was not a fan of meatloaf, all right? And it didn't matter whose meatloaf it was. I just didn't like meatloaf. Sorry about that, Mom, I love you, but I just didn't like meatloaf when I was a kid. But I decided to redefine it so that it would be delicious. And that's what I have here. I have the ingredients and the recipe for the best tasting meatloaf you'll ever eat. I came up with this 30 years ago, folks. So I'll tell you what, come this way and I'll show you one of my best recipes ever. This is meatloaf. Come on over. All right, guys, take a look at this beautiful array of ingredients. And let's start right back over here, right next to my steaming pot. Right back here, I have this beautiful cut of chuck. Now that's a couple of pounds of chuck right there, guys, and I'm going to take that, fat and all, and grind it up into a beautiful, soft, fresh ground beef. Now, if you want to get pre-ground beef, that's fine, but I'm going to recommend that if you can grind your own, definitely go ahead, because you truly get a better and much softer product. Okay, now down here, let's look at these beautiful ingredients that I have. First of all, in the front row here, I've got 8 ounces of tomato sauce and 15 to 16 ounces of diced tomatoes in their own juice. Now, I'm going to say something about tomatoes, freshness, canning, and all of that. Generally, I do not approve of canned products. I think it's really lacking. However, there is one fruit that really needs to be canned in order for you to get fresh. Unless, of course, it's summer and you can go to the farmer's market and get them fresh. I recommend you get tomatoes in the can only for the reason that those that are picked in the field that are ripe, and I mean directly ripe on the vine while it's still in the ground, those are the sweetest of all tomatoes, and they're the ones that go straight to canning. They never hit the grocery store, folks. They go straight in to being used in cans or other commercial products, and that's the reason that when you open canned tomatoes and you eat those, that they seem so much sweeter than the ones in your produce section at the grocery store. That's because these are actually really vine ripened. And that little snip of vine that you see in the grocery store now that's got tomatoes hanging on it, that's not really vine ripened. Vine ripened means that that vine was still attached to the plant, and the plant's growing in the ground when the tomato actually turns red. And it turns really sweet because of the way the plant feeds it. And when it's removed from the plant, that feeding stops, and that tomato has to ripen from the sweetness that it already has. Onto the rest of the ingredients, I have an onion. This is just a medium sweet yellow onion. I've got garlic here. I'm going to be using, in the neighborhood of about 1 to 2 tablespoons of fine minced garlic. I'm going to want about a tablespoon of salt. This right here is about a half a cup of grated Parmesan. Okay, maybe slightly more than a half. That could be closer to 3/4. But this was fresh grated, and I kind of went through it like this, and I've been letting it dry. The drier this gets, the better. This is our binder, by the way. We're not going to be using bread, egg, or anything like that as a binder. It's unneeded. We want our meat to be soft and loose, not dense and hard. And if I use egg and the panko, or excuse me, egg and breadcrumbs, not panko, but if I use egg and breadcrumbs, then it's going to give a much more dense meatloaf, where this makes it much softer and tender. On our other ingredients here, oregano, thyme, rosemary, and basil. Now, how much? I'm going to be using 2 to 3 teaspoons of oregano, about 1 tablespoon of the thyme, 1 to 1.5 tablespoons of rosemary. I'll put that into my mortar and pestle and rub it down a bit. That way it mixes in well with that meat, and I don't have these woody stalks in my food. The basil, I'm going to want about 2 tablespoons of it. Back here, I have 1 cup of a sweet red wine. You know, a nice rosé works well for that, okay? Over here, this is 8 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese. And I'm going to use a sharp cheddar for this, guys. Now, this is going to be interesting. I'm not going to actually mix the cheddar directly into the meat. We're going to do that a whole different way, and I'll show you how it's done in a little bit. This gets mixed directly into the meat because that's our binding agent. Now, let's get right on with making this. It's real easy to do. We're going to start by grinding up our meat, and then we'll season it up and make the best meatloaf in the world. Now guys, I am here with my grinder, and mine is just an attachment that goes on my mixer. You can also purchase these that are hand crank. They're inexpensive, I mean really cheap. And the electric ones don't cost much at all either, okay? So you can get a good electric grinder for under $50, and you can get a hand crank type for around $20 or less. The one that goes on your mixers, those are about the same price as the electric ones. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't on those, right? Now, let's get this cut up. I'm just going to slice it down so it'll fit down into, and remember, I was saving all of it. The meat, the fat, everything goes in there. Because that fat, folks, that's flavor. And the cutting job doesn't have to be pretty here. Remember, this is going to be ground up, right? There we are. So we'll push this back out of my way. Get this grinder started up. Now, something I'm going to give you a forewarning about, folks. When it comes to that thing right up there, that nozzle, don't point it at your face. If you point that thing straight at you, you're just begging for trouble, okay? Because these things will sometimes spit. Now, what I mean by spit is that it will take the juices of whatever it is you're grinding, and it'll shoot them right out of there. And if you stand in front of the business end of that, you're probably going to get hit with some of that. So just keep feeding that meat right into your grinder. And folks, this doesn't take long. If you have a meat grinder, this goes pretty darn quick. There, it just spit. I don't know if you saw it, but it did it. All you have to do is look down into the top of it to make sure it's clear, which it is. So we're done. You see, that was quick, wasn't it? And look at this. This meat, folks, is so very delicate, so soft. If you want the very best way to do your meat and to have a good grind, just get your own grinder and you're going to be so happy with the results. I'm going to kind of spread my meat out a little bit. And the next thing, I'm going to bring my seasonings right over to this station, and we're going to get busy seasoning this up and getting it ready to go down in our pan. Okay? Now, on to the next. Now guys, let's get on with preparing our seasonings for this. I've pulled out some garlic. Now, I want my cloves naked like this, but they have this paper on them. People make removing this paper way too difficult, guys. Okay? The thing of it is there's so many different ways that people try to do this, and they convolute it, and it doesn't need to be like that. So let me show you a trick when it comes to pulling paper off of garlic. Take that clove of garlic in between your thumb and forefinger on each hand. Squeeze firmly but not too tight, and you're going to flex from side to side, moving your hands in opposite directions, but just lightly enough to cause the clove inside to flex slightly without breaking. And what's going to happen is it breaks the paper free from the clove doing that. Here it goes. There we go. There's a crackling sound that you'll hear. That's that paper coming loose. There it is. Done. So that's all you have to do. Don't make removing paper hard when it comes to dehusking garlic, okay? It's not that tough. Now guys, I need to go ahead and get this garlic minced up. So I'm going to cut that scab end off of my garlic. Now, when it comes to working garlic, all you have to do is, number one, you don't want it to be bouncing around while you're trying to mince it. So you need to get it under control. And I do that just by crushing it. There. Now it's not going to bob or bounce around on me. It's going to stay in place while I take my knife to it. Alright guys, this is one of those up close and personal moments between you, me, and the knife, okay? So what I'm going to do is take my knife and I'm going to hang on to the back of it a totally different way from the way you see me tell you most of the time. I tell you normally to choke up and pinch that blade. By the way, that will work for this, but it's not quite as fast. To do this the faster method, you have to pull back on that handle, right back here. The front of the knife, or I should say the tip of the knife out here, where there's bull noses right here, my hand is going to be on top of that. And it's only going to be directing the knife from side to side and keeping a little tension on the front of the knife. Because the method I'm going to use here is going to be a rocking method like this. And I'm going to chop that garlic up that way. Now to start with, not so hard. Remember, thumb under. See how that works? That rocking? It's like a double cut. So for each movement, you get 2 cuts. And that's what allows this to work quickly and efficiently. So now as you get your pieces smaller, you can actually speed up. Isn't that simple? Now we are at a coarse dice. This is a beautiful way to do garlic, and it doesn't require you have any extra implements in the kitchen. Remember, that knife is your primary source of processing food. How efficient, huh? One more time. Folks, I was wanting about 1 to 1.5, or did I say 1 to 2 tablespoons of garlic? Yeah, it's really 1 to 2 tablespoons. And guess what I have there? I got about 1.5. And there's your mincing lesson. That was pretty neat, wasn't it? Okay guys, let's get on with taking care of that rosemary. Remember, there was a couple of these items we had to process. Now, 1 tablespoon, and that's 1/2 tablespoon. Now, I can see where it is possible that you guys might sometimes doubt my measurements. So let me show you something. Remember, this is no sleight of hand, no trick photography here. This is just stew being stew. All right. As I said, approximately 1 tablespoon and 1/2. So believe it or not, when I give those measurements, I'm not just spouting off. What that is decades of experience right there in being used to measuring ingredients. Once you've measured it out so many times and you've measured it into your hand, you get a feel for it. But you don't do that until you put it first in a measuring spoon and put it in your hand and look at it and learn what it looks like to have a tablespoon of this or a tablespoon of that in your hand. Different things measure differently also. Powders versus something like this, which is real twiggy. Now these are actually the leaves of the rosemary, but those leaves when they're dried aren't soft and supple the way they are when they are fresh. And when they're fresh, even then they still have a needly-like compound. Now, a needly-like shape to them, excuse me. Here we are. Look at this. We have our rubbed rosemary. What I'm going to do is get it seasoned up now with all of our goodies. First off, we wanted some salt on there. So close to 1.25 teaspoons to 1.5 teaspoons of salt is what I put there. Remember, the Parmesan is salty, so you don't have to go crazy with the salt, all right? Our garlic, I don't have to be overly neat with this. Our oregano, we needed to use 2 teaspoons, 2 to 3 teaspoons actually. That's a teaspoon, guys. See, I didn't drop very much of that, did I? Look at that, that's a teaspoon, okay? Now, the oregano, it has a tendency to be, well, extremely pungent, okay? That's about 1.25 teaspoons and about another 1/2, so that's close to 3. Oregano is pungent and it can overwhelm other flavors just like that, okay? So be cautious with it, use it, enjoy it, but remember, it doesn't take too much of it. Basil is sweet and wonderful tasting. There is 1 tablespoon. There's another. 1 tablespoon of the thyme. You can go a little bit less if you want. Remember, rubbed thyme is pretty potent. Fresh thyme isn't quite so intense, but it is potent too. Now is the point where I need to get just a little bit messy, and that's okay, because this is the fun of the dish right here. So I want to glove up, get the rest of my ingredients on here. There's some garlic I needed to finish getting out of that. There we go. I want all of it. I want all of this Parmesan cheese. Remember, the Parmesan is a binder, and the way that works, Parmesan is a very, very dry cheese all by itself. Okay, even when it was like this in the block form and you grate it, it's still a remarkably dry cheese, and it absorbs fats really quick and easy. So as fats are released from this meat, this is going to absorb that, and it's going to kind of act like a binder and hold everything together. It's really funky the way it works, but it does work, and it works well. So what I want to do now is to take my meat and just go at it. It's a matter of mixing it all in, and anything that got away on that board, you just pick it up and get it in that meat. Now, a couple of things I'm going to caution you about. Number one, what makes for a dense meatloaf, okay? Overworking the meat will certainly give you a dense meatloaf. Not having enough fat will give you a dense meatloaf, okay? Having too much binder ingredient, for instance, if you use egg and, like I was mentioning earlier, the egg and breadcrumb method. Well, that's nice, but it makes a very dense product. And I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for soft, easy to bite through, easy to cut, not too dense, with flavor just running through it. And guys, what I have right there is fully mixed. It's ready to go. What I want to do now is I want to treat this sort of like dough. And I want to knead it. I know it seems weird, but what I'm doing is I'm getting those meat fibers to stick to each other, so I don't have too many cracks and things going on in my meat. Now I'm mashing it out flat. This is an important part. Where your edges break, just seal them back together. Now, I want to tell you, when you're doing your meatloaf, what we're going to do is we're going to do a roll with cheese in the middle of it, and that's what that cheddar cheese is for. When you're doing a meatloaf like this, you want the meat itself to not be wider than the pan that you're cooking in. So you need to make that meat, the width of the flat of meat that you're making, no wider than the pan it's going to go into. You'll see why here in a moment. And if you notice, I keep pressing it down and pushing it out, making it longer, keeping the width size right. Now I have this down to about a half an inch or slightly thicker, maybe, just slightly. So what I'm going to do, I'm put this cheese on here. I'm not going to put some of the cheese on there, folks. All of the cheese goes on there, okay? Remember, that's 8 ounces. If you're thinking, my God, that is unreal. There's too much cheese there. It's a cholesterol nightmare. Yeah, I didn't say this was healthy cooking today, okay? This is Texas cooking today. And this, like I said, is a recipe I came up with when I was in my early 20s. It is off the hook delicious. All I'm trying to do now is just get this cheddar on here nice and even. And if you'll notice, I'm leaving a little of the meat exposed on the edges. There's a reason for that, okay? What's going to happen as this cooks, I'm going to press this down. As this cooks, this cheese is going to melt. A lot of it, and I mean a whole lot of it, is going to be absorbed right into the meat. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that meat to take in that extra cheese and have that real cheesy, yummy, sharp flavor to it. Oh, wow. And then some of it will seep out, but the vast majority of it will be absorbed by the meat. So don't worry about a little seepage. Remember, that will happen. Now, if you see I'm rolling it, isn't that crazy looking? Make sure as you roll it, you seal these ends. Just kind of pinch them a little bit and press them in. Isn't that neat? Now, that's a meatloaf, guys. I know, it's totally different from everything you've been taught in the past about making meatloaf, isn't it? Now what I'm doing is I'm sealing it where those seams are. And this is important. I'm shaping it because I want it to be sort of log shaped, actually. Round. As much so as I can get it. And then little pieces of cheese marks the top, or where the flap came over. And I want that up in my pot that I'm going to cook in. Okay guys, I'm going to push that over. Let me get the pot I'm going to cook in, and let's get on with finishing this up and getting it in the oven. Ooh, yummy. Alright guys, let's get this into our pot to be cooked. First thing I'm doing, I'm putting some oil in the bottom here. You can use any oil you want. I'm just throwing in an extra virgin olive oil, and I'm coating it around up on the sides. And what this does is it just helps when I am cooking in the oven to keep a bunch of junk from sticking. Now I want to get my meat right down in there. Now, time for the toppings. We got to get our onion, tomatoes, wine, and all that stuff right up in here. Also, there's some other seasoning that goes on this. It's going to really make it pop. Now, guys, let's prepare our onion to top the meatloaf that we're making. Now, when you're cutting an onion, as I told you earlier, choke up on that knife and pinch it and grab the knife just like this. This gives you ultimate roll control, much better control of the blade. And once you learn to do this, once you learn to hold it just like that, you're going to feel so comfortable doing it. Okay, so just get used to it. Now, I'm going to top the onion, meaning remove this part where the stem came up, leaving the root intact. Always process the root on an onion last, guys, and there's a reason. When an onion weeps, or meaning when it gives up its juices, it exudes those juices through both ends. If you cut it, see, like now it's becoming wet there. If I cut it down here, it would be dropping 2 to 3 times more of that juice right there than it would be from this end, okay? Because it naturally flows that way. Next thing I need to do is remove that outer layer of onion. And the reason I do this is because of spots just like this. See how that's thin? And it doesn't cook up well. So you don't want a thin onion that's going to be papery and nasty down in your food. So let's get that off. You do sacrifice a little of what looks good, but don't worry about that. Just get rid of it. It won't cook up well, folks. Now our onion is down to this point, and this is easy. What I have to do, remove my root now. Now watch this. See how fast that juice is coming up on that? Look at that. Look how the milk is just flowing on it. It's just dripping off so fast. And that's a smaller cut. Next thing, cut it in half just like that. Now all I have to do is cut these half rings. Remember, when doing that, keep those fingers turned under like this and the thumb behind. That way, this knuckle right here becomes the guide to the side of your knife, right? Okay. Now, I can use that onion on top of my meatloaf, and it is ready to go. All right, guys, check this out. Beautiful. We're almost ready to go with this. What I need to do now is to get my toppings on here, and it's a really cool, neat thing. First thing, I want to take that tomato sauce. I'm going to run it right over the top of this. And you might be thinking, well, if you're going to do that, why not use ketchup? Guys, ketchup is nasty, okay? Just use some plain tomato sauce. You don't need all that extra sugar, corn syrup, and yuck that comprises ketchup. Next thing I want on this, my tomatoes. There's that juice. Now, our rosemary. And very gently dust that over the top. My wine. We'll put some down in the sides of this. Isn't that lovely, guys? Bet you never thought about doing a meatloaf quite like that, right? And we don't have to be pretty with it, because all of that's going to get soft and cook up lovely. There's the rest of that onion. The onion will release its juices and it'll flow into the meat as well. So what we have there is something absolutely gorgeous. And you can see the similarities between that and spaghetti and meatballs, guys. Okay, absent the pasta, not a huge difference. A little bit of salt on top. And the meatloaf has its salt, but my toppings, my sauce does not. So there we go. All I have to do now is get it in my oven. You're going to need that oven at 325 degrees. And guys, this generally takes about 45 minutes to an hour to get fully cooked. Now guys, we're going to be checking the temperature on this later with my thermometer. And I'm going to want the temperature in the core of this meatloaf to be right around 170, 180, right in that zone. No less than 170. And that's the temperature that beef becomes when it's cooked medium to medium well, and that's just perfect. You don't want this to be pink or red in the middle, but you do want it to be just cooked without cooking any more than that. Otherwise, then it starts getting dry and it starts getting tough and it's not as good. So now it's just a matter of time. Put this guy down in the oven and grab a glass of something to enjoy. Okay guys, it's time for us to get this in the oven. Center rack. Oh yes. All right, there we go. That is 325 degrees, guys, and I'm just going to let it sit in there. It's going to be, like I said, about an hour. And this is where you're going to want that cooking thermometer or meat thermometer, either one. You're going to want to know the temperature in the middle of this because it's a big chunk of meat there, and you don't want it raw in the middle. Okay, so you got to cook it right. So the reason we don't have the temperature really high, because then I would overcook the outside and the middle wouldn't get done right. So we're doing 325, taking our time, bringing those ingredients up slowly. And once the heat gets all the way through it, we're looking at some delicious. All right. In the meantime, hey, let's go and relax. And I think I got a little cleanup to do here. You guys have a good time. Guys, I have just now pulled this out of the oven. It is still steamy, bubbling hot. What we're going to do right now is check the temperature on this. Okay, I have here my little temperature gauge showing a little over 80 degrees up in here. We'll put in there 181, just perfect. Around 180, 181 is what I'm getting in the center of this. What I'm going to do now is do what you do with any cut of meat after it is cooked. You rest it. So guess what, guys? I'm just going to leave it there. You can leave it with the lid off if you want, or cover it. Doesn't matter, either way it works. I'm just going to let it sit and rest. How long? Hey, on something like this, where you have that meat that is heated up, and there's still heat getting pushed into the meat right now from the juices around the side. When you have something like that going on, you have to allow that to kind of stabilize. Now, in addition, on top of this, there's a lot of fat. If you want to remove that fat from this, all you have to do is lower a spoon into this. See there? And there I've removed most of the fat. In the bottom of that, there's a little bit of my sauce, but that's not a big deal. It's not such a great loss. Now what I'm going to do is just set my timer and wait for this guy to finish resting. And in the process, what it's doing as it's finishing up, once the heat stabilizes throughout and that meat starts cooling, it will actually start pulling some of the juices back into it. The juices that are pushed out towards the outer edge of the meat right now will pull back to the center, and it comes out much better. It comes out juicier and fuller. So we give it time. There's no rush on this, guys. Time is your friend when it comes to this type of cooking. Guys, our resting time is over. I have given this 25 minutes to rest. Enough time that this heavy glass lid is cool enough for me to touch. Something else that's been happening here, before I open this up, I want you to understand. As this was in the oven, the mixture inside would bubble and it would splatter against this glass lid, and it would create this brown fond, what chefs call a fond, which normally develops in the bottom of a pan, but basically it's just caramelized juices. In other words, the stacking of carbons. That develops complex flavors that are delicious. Now what's happened here is after I let this set, moisture formed on this lid. As the lid cooled and the mixture down below was hotter than this lid, it started condensing on the inside, and that moisture is breaking loose that fond, and it's been rolling down and dripping down into the juices inside of this. Real important thing to do, guys. Now watch what I do. I want to lift this and turn it quickly. I'm going to take my spatula, and I'm just going to loosen up some of that. And look at this brown juice. That's what's been dripping out of this whole time. And what that is, like I said, that's complex flavors. Another way of saying it is that is delicious. Okay? And if you're not sure, taste it. It's good. Very good. Now, all I need to do is slice this guy up and plate it up so I can have a wonderful meatloaf dinner. Okay guys, I think I need to slice some of this up and get it on my plate. Ooh, and I've been looking forward to this. And this isn't hard to cut, by the way. I'm trying to be gentle so I don't break it. Cool. Now we can get that out of there and plate it up. And the first thing I want to do And I don't want to use a solid spoon like this. I want a slotted spoon. I want to get some of my fruits and vegetables, that stuff right there. I'm going to put it on my plate first, because I want my meat to set right on top of that. Now guys, when you're plating is a very important thing, and it needs to be pretty, but at the same time it also needs to be functional. So be sensible about this. When you're doing it, understand you may get some drips and drops on the edges. That'll be cleaned up in a moment. Now that's not all I was going to do. That's the beginning. This needs a vegetable other than what it's received, you know, to make it a nice dinner, and some color. Now guys, I'm going to say something. When you're plating something up, it needs to have some decoration to it. Now let's go ahead and get these little guys. What I have here is a bunch of little sliced chilies. And these are sweet chilies, so they have a really desirable flavor. Their appearance is lovely. There we go. There. Now we have our color. It's a beautiful dish and ready to go. To top this off, I'm going to use a little of the au jus from my roast. Now let's clean up the remainder of our mess. Remember, clean plating, beautiful colors, all of it matters, folks. It really does. And the reason it matters is because when you first sit down to a plate of food, you eat with your eyes first, okay? The first thing that strikes you, that's the beauty of the dish. And if it stands out, it makes it desirable. Well, there it is, guys. Simple meatloaf. Simple? No, but delicious. Definitely. Here is a plate of absolute delicious goodness. Look at this, guys. Oh, yeah. Now that's kind of redefining meatloaf in its own special way. Oh, how tender. Okay. All of these herby tones, first of all. This note of sweetness. The beefy. Man, that's what meatloaf should be, guys. It's so good. Sweet, delicious, explosive with flavor, tender, moist, perfect. I'm sorry, I had to reinvent the meatloaf. It was wrong. It needed to be right, and now it is. So guys, give this a try. You're gonna love it. Folks, I would like to say thank you very, very much for watching my show. To my subscribers, an extra special thanks to you, and cheers. If you haven't subscribed, I would like to ask you, please do. Click the bell. I'm gonna let you know when I have new recipes coming out. It's gonna be a lot of them, usually on Thursdays, okay? That's when you're gonna find me. I would like to say thank you again for watching the show. Please give me a thumbs up. I love comments, folks, and I'm gonna answer back most of the time, so please do. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.